and today is a great example, writes an original song to go with the message, and we are so blessed to have that level of creativity in our community. I'm so grateful. Thank you, Deb. So I want to begin with a story told by Cohen, a great New Thought author and spiritual master and teacher. He tells of the story when he went away for a conference, and he met this woman and introduced himself, and she introduced herself. She said, "Hello, my name is Marge, and I'm a survivor of sexual abuse." And they went on and had a conversation. And what he noticed is that the identity that she had offered was carried in her atmosphere, in her emotional atmosphere. There was a heaviness to her. And he noticed that as she went around and met other people, she introduced herself the same way. "Hello, my name is Marge. I'm a survivor of sexual abuse." So in truth, what he said is he realized she was in bondage to her identity, to a limited identity, to not really realizing a full identity, even though this identity had maybe helped her in processing some of her pain and trauma. She was still living in the field of that identity. And so he told the story of Buddha. There's a story that Buddha actually told at one point in time that illustrates the weight of carrying a certain identity, a limited identity of who we are. He tells the story of a traveler who came upon a very wide and very deep river. And the traveler realized he needed to build a raft, so he gathered the materials from shore that he could and built a raft. And he was so proud of himself for having done that. And so he made it across to the other side. And then he saw before him, to continue the journey, he had to go up a mountain. And even though he realized, he sat there and he contemplated, and he realized that even though that raft had been so useful in getting him across to the other side, that it would be a huge burden to carry up the mountain. So what identities are you carrying with you? And notice whatever those identities are, and they could be things like, I'm a student, I'm a seeker, I'm a recovering addict, I'm someone who's had a very hard life, or even I'm a child of God. And you're going, well, what's so limited about that? Any identity that we hold on to that is anything other than I'm an individualization of God, I'm pure spirit. And one of the things that we use in our community often is that I am Kathleen, I am God having a Kathleen experience, and there is God sitting over there having a Michelle experience, and you are all God having whatever individualized experience that you are. When we understand our true identity is, in essence, is the one life, the one source, the one presence, and the one power, and that we are individualizing that, it's a whole different ballgame. That's our true identity. That's our truth. That is the truth that sets us free. You know, I understand that in this time-space reality, in our culture, in our society, this time on this planet, we get bombarded with messages that are opposite of this truth. We get messages that we are our bodies, that we are our education, that we are our color, that we are a certain race, that we are a certain, you could go on and on. We're all whatever the different labels are. I'm a Christian, I'm a Jew, I'm a, whatever it might be. What can happen, though, in claiming these as our identity is that it can end up becoming a burden in our evolutionary path up the mountain. So it's important to say, yeah, that's a part of who I am, but it's not the truth of who I am. That's part of my human identity, but it's not the true identity that is going to set me free. So anchored in truth, this is what happens, and this is what Emma Curtis Hopkins is talking about. Anchored in truth, we are set free. She talks about words of truth being an elixir. What is an elixir? An elixir is a potion. It is a healing medicine. We can think of it as a transforming medicine or a transforming power. Words of truth. Words of truth. Can it be that simple? It may be that simple, and yet we know that it's also a process, and it's something that we dedicate ourselves to in order to experience that true elixir power, that healing power within us. So today we are talking about the path to the truth, our true identity, a truth, knowing the truth that sets us free. And Emma Curtis Hopkins offers 3 key practices that we can do to embody our true identity. She talks about thinking the truth, speaking the truth, and writing the truth. And what she says is this, and she talks about using words of truth, thinking words of truth, speaking words of truth, writing words of truth. And then she goes on to say, and the next is living them. And she says we are sure to do that if we think, speak, and write them, write those words, in other words. It is by faithfully doing all these things that we accomplish the works of the Spirit, those actions in our lives, those behaviors in our lives that lead to a world that works for all, heaven on earth. So I've broken it down into these 3 things. Those are my 3 key talking points today. So let's talk about thinking words of truth that set us free. I'd like to begin with a story that illustrates this so beautifully. There once was a village that had experienced 5 consecutive years of drought. No rain whatsoever in that period of time. And the people in the village had summoned rainmakers from all over the region to do their rain-making rituals, and nothing happened. It didn't work. It hadn't worked. And they were getting really desperate, and they'd heard about a rainmaker that lived far, far away, and they sent off one of their people and summoned this person to come back. And so this man came back, this rainmaker came back, set up a tent, and went inside, closed the flap. And the people were wondering what's going on. We don't see any rituals. He's just in his tent. And so one day 1 passed, day 2 passed, day 3 passed, day 4 passed, and on day 5, it started to rain. They were delighted. They were so full of joy, and they wanted to know what his secret was. So when the rainmaker came out and enjoyed the rain coming down and falling on the parched earth, everybody said, well, what was it? What did you do? What did you do that made the rain come? And the rainmaker said, I've done nothing. They said, but you came, you went in the tent. I don't know what you were doing in there, but it's raining now. What happened? And the rainmaker said, he said, when I came to your village, I noticed that everything was out of harmony with the divine, out of harmony with heaven, heavenly state of consciousness is what we say in our teaching. And so what I did is put my mind in alignment, in harmony with the divine, and the rain came. So it's profound. This is a deep message for me. The message of this is the importance of aligning our consciousness with our true identity, with the harmony of the universe, our oneness with the all that is, as a very important first step in order to take divinely inspired action. I think about this because I think about people who have not done this and go out and try to be a part of a cause, and their anger and their resentment and their frustration and whatever gets in the way, and they end up doing things that create more harm than good. And I'm sure you can think of examples like that. So this getting into alignment with truth is a huge and important step. So thinking the truth, thinking words of truth, like the Rainmaker was doing. Reverend, this is a CSL minister, Reverend Christopher Michaels says that in using spiritual mind treatment, this is a way that we align ourselves with harmony with truth. We know the truth. He said we move away from hope, wish, and try. We move away from I hope it's going to happen, I wish it was going to happen, I'll try to make it happen. Instead, we live in a state or in the land of, let's say, we live in the land of knowing, trusting, and having faith in. So that's thinking words of truth. Speaking the truth, speaking words of truth that set us free. I have another story. This is a story people were sitting on a bench and having a discussion about the best position for prayer, best posture you can put yourself in for prayer. And meanwhile, there was a telephone repairman who was working kind of up above them. So the priest was first, and he said, you know, for me, the very best position is kneeling. To which the minister said, well, I find that the best position is praying with my head up and my arms outstretched to heaven. And the guru said, well, you know, for me, the best position is lotus position, with my hands in namaste position. And the repairman who's up there couldn't contain himself any longer. And he said, hey, fellas, the very best praying that I ever did when I was hanging upside down from a telephone pole. So I don't know what your best position is, physical position. But what I do know is, these are all different ways that we get ourselves prepared and ready to be that avenue through which truth comes through. What I do know is that great scripture, know the truth, and the truth shall set you free, is what we do when we use the form of prayer that we use in our teaching called spiritual mind treatment. It's affirmative prayer. It is a knowing of the truth. It begins with all there is one source, one life, one presence, one power. It's waking up to that this is a spiritual universe governed by spiritual law, and that we are pure spirit in a human body, having a spiritual experience. It's all spirit. Everything that our body is made of spiritual substance. Everything around us is spiritual substance. And so, speaking the truth then, speaking the words of truth, sets us free. I'd like to share a story that is actually in in the Essential Ernest Holmes book. And it's on page 122 for those of you who have the book. And it's a story about a conference that Ernest Holmes was attending in a hotel. And he got a call from somebody else in one of the other rooms in the hotel and said, could you please come over? I really need your help. He was over there, and there was this man who explained, he was totally inebriated, he could tell. And yet the man explained about how he had this wonderful wife, these wonderful children, and yet he found himself going off on these binges that seemed uncontrollable, and he wanted to stop. He desperately wanted to stop. And so Ernest Holmes knew what to do. He told, basically, he actually said, okay, you stay here, I'm going to go back and pray. So he called his friend, Mr. Armour, who was also very much involved in the teaching, the religious science teachings, and they went into into Holmes' hotel room, and they prayed. They knew the truth. I'm going to give you a sample of what this prayer sounded like. And remember, it's affirming this man's truth. This man is conscious that he is pure spirit. He is poised and at peace within himself. There is nothing in him that craves alcohol. He is not seeking to escape from anything. He meets every issue of life without fear. There is nothing to run away from, nothing to avoid. At all times, he has a sense of well-being, of happiness, of security, and of self-expression. There is no memory of ever having received any pleasure or benefit from alcohol. There is no anticipation that he can ever receive pleasure or benefit from it. The spirit within him is satisfied. It is radiant. It never seeks to escape from itself. It exists in its own sense of self-adequacy. It exists, that means the spirit that this man is, exists in joy, in freedom, and in peace. So it said that they went on to do this work for 10 or 15 minutes. And then they worked again, for several hours, continuing to build on these thoughts in their own consciousness. And why does that work? This man's over here, they're over there, because we all live, move, and have our being in one infinite universal mind. We are points of consciousness in that universal mind. We're all connected. So by Holmes and Mr. Armour knowing the truth about this man, the next morning they went and found him, and he was totally sober. And so, that's one point in time, but then he goes on to say, and the man never took a drink again. This is the power of the truth. This is the healing elixir quality of it. It set us free. It set this man free from alcoholism and the thought atmosphere that created alcoholism in him. The next key point is writing words of truth set you free. And I think about how much journaling has served me. And I know many of you out there are journalers. And we know that there's a lot of research that people who journal develop a greater sense of health and well-being. And there are all different kinds of ways to journal. My favorite ways to journal, though, are this, is to write out spiritual mind treatments, to know the truth, write words of truth, and to know these words, and to shift my consciousness. I find that writing helps me really focus on the truth and really build up that logic of truth in my consciousness. And we know when we do that, we are rewiring our entire neurobiology to be in alignment with that. I also like to write gratitude lists, write down what I'm grateful for, and also list affirmations. And I don't do this all the time, but every once in a while I'll have a certain affirmation that I really want to firm up in my consciousness, and I'll write it out 25 times every night before I go to bed until I feel like I've had a shift. So how can we combine these? I actually found something. I have to say I haven't tried it, but I know other people who have done it, and it's a really interesting way to combine them. So first you get a piece of paper and you write down your affirmation. So I'm just going to imagine I'm writing down, I am light. And I am light, that's a good one. And then contemplate, so think about the meaning of that. Imagine being light in your own mind. And then what you do is you place the paper underneath a glass of water. So you have a glass of water there with you. And we know that from the work of Dr. Moto that water can pick up the vibrations of what is around it. So just placing it on those words and being in your atmosphere, focusing on I am light, is really powerful. Then they recommend that you rub your hands together to build up the energy flow of this truth of I am light, and put it around the glass and then drink it. Thinking words of truth, speaking words of truth, writing words of truth, combining them all together. I just thought that was a really interesting way of doing it. So then there's living the truth, right? We're doing all of these things which prepares ourselves in the mental atmosphere to really live from a high place, from a high vibrational frequency when we do our work in the world, whatever it might be, when we stand up for the causes that we believe in. Emily Cady, who is part of the Unity movement, says that results will be added unto us in greater measure when we turn our thoughts to embodying the indwelling Christ. That's our true identity. Embodying the indwelling Christ into our being. She said, then there must be more living of the truth and teaching others the truth. And she also said there must be more incorporating of truth in our very flesh and bone, incorporating the truth in our very flesh and bone. And then I thought about Representative John Lewis. Many of you know that he just recently made his transition, a truly great statesman, civil rights activist. And this is a man that I know had the truth in his flesh and bone. I was reading over some of his quotes, and I want to share one with you that I think demonstrates how he embodied, we talk about embodied it in our flesh and bone, embodied the truth. Listen to this. This is by a civil rights activist and a statesman who believes in nonviolence as a way, nonviolent protest as a way for change. He said, you are light. You are light. Study the path of others. And he's talking about others who have paved the way, the Gandhis, the Martin Luther Kings, Jesus of Nazareth, Buddha. Study the path of others to make your way easier and more abundant. Lean toward the whispers of your own heart. Discover the universal truth and follow its dictates. Release the need to hate, to harbor division, and the enticement of revenge. He's letting everybody know this is not the way. Hold only love, only peace in your heart. When it's your time, don't be afraid to stand up, speak up, and speak out against injustice. And if you follow your truth down the road to peace and the affirmation of love, if you shine like a beacon for all to see, then the poetry of all the great dreamers and philosophers is yours to manifest as a beloved community. that is finally at peace with itself. Whoa. It goes on to say that freedom is the continuous action we all must take. Action we all must take. And each generation must do its part to create an even more fair and more just society. Truth lived in his flesh and bone. He spoke it, he wrote it, he thought it, he lived it. So let's just take a moment of silence in honor of a truly great man who has left the earth and yet I know is continuing on his eternal journey. So I would like to conclude with a taste of the words of Emma Curtis Hopkins from The Radiant I Am that relate to what we've talked about today. And remember, she speaks from a place of knowing her true identity as a co-creator with God and as that presence individualized. I am the power of mind to my universe. An elixir of intelligence is on its stopless march from me at my center forever through all the reaches of space. I decree intelligence in all my thoughts. I am a tower whose radiance is unending wisdom through all things. This is my ministry. I think this, I speak this, I write this, I live this. I am the power of speech. I am a tower whose radiance sheds eloquent, inspiring speech, blessing all. This is my ministry. I think this, I speak this, I write this, I live this. I am the power of writing, of recording. I am the inspiring pen of the world. I shall find my inspiration everywhere. All except my inspirations vanish. I am a tower whose radiance is the inspiration to pen itself in its divinity. I think this, I speak this, I write this, I live this. I am the power of justice. I decree that there is no injustice. Nothing is unjust, and thus order and beauty and peace reign from pole star to southern cross. I am a scale whose rods are the beams of unbreakable right. All the poise and balance that I am, I radiate through all the universe, and all things feel the joy of adjustment. This is my ministry. I think this, I speak this, I write this, I live this. And so it is. So it is. Namaste, my friends. And now I'd like to introduce Deb.